Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to an exciting topic, exciting webinar we have today. We're going to be talking all about Exasol, MCP server, and Text-to-SQL. So there's a ton of exciting stuff happening. We're going to try to dive right in. Thank you all for joining us. A little bit of housekeeping as we go. I'm going to introduce myself, and then my colleague Dirk is going to say hello, and we're going to be handing it off throughout the presentation here. And if you're in GoToMeeting, you have the option to both ask questions and add comments. So we definitely encourage you to do both of those. We're going to reserve some time at the end to answer those questions. And we definitely want this to feel like a conversation. So please feel free to ask or comment and engage in any way that works for you. Say a quick hello. My name is Madeline Corneli, and I lead our AI and ML product team here at Exasol. So I'm going to be kicking things off, and then I'm going to be handing it over to Dirk. Dirk, if you want to say a quick hello.
Yeah, hello, my name is Dirk. I'm a global partner solution architect for the past 2 years within Exasol, and also, like Madeleine, heavily involved in AI and ML for Exasol, and one of the authors from the Text-to-SQL we are going to see later.
Fantastic. All right, so we're going to try to cover a lot today. We're going to start with a pretty basic Exasol overview just to kind of get us all on the same page. This may be old news or new news for all of you. So we'll try to get through that pretty quickly just so we're starting on the same foundation. And I'm going to talk about kind of an intro into what's an MCP server, why is it relevant, especially in the world of databases and Exasol. Then we're going to dive into a more specific topic and talk about governed SQL. We're going to explain what that means, why it's relevant, and then Dirk's going to demo for us. They're actually going to get to see all of this functionality live, and then we're going to wrap it up with some key takeaways. And again, at the end, we're going to try to answer any questions or comments that come in, so feel free to leave those. Awesome. Let's start with talking about Exasol overall. Now, this is a busy slide, and that's because when you're talking about a data platform, there's a lot going on. And so I want to call out a few key pieces of the Exasol platform and how this fits especially into AI workloads and AI solutions. So there are tons of different ways that Exasol can plug into your AI and ML stack. That starts with our integration suite over here on the left. So we have a whole suite of integrations that allow you to work directly with Exasol, but also use the tools that fit best for your organization. So whether you're familiar with Pandas, you like coding in Python, we have tools for that. We have an entire AI lab that's designed around getting you up and running and using your preferred data science tools with Exasol. We also integrate with more operational tools, so things like Data Robot, Dataiku, and ML Flow. And that spans kind of this whole spectrum of both your more complex, your more technical data science tools, all the way up to more low and no code tooling like SageMaker and EvoML. So the intention there is we really want to appeal to a broad audience and let you use the tools that work best for you as you start to integrate data science into your data stack with Exasol. Now, at the heart of all of this is Exasol's scalable query engine. There are a few key functionalities that set Exasol apart. First is multi-language support. So you're not confined to just SQL. You can actually execute code within SQL statements from Exasol. So that includes Python, Java, R, and Lua. And that means that you can write your data science, your AI functions, your callouts, whether you're calling out to APIs, whether you're calling out to models, whether you're training models, generating inferences, all of that can be wrapped up and actually executed directly by Exasol's query engine. And the beauty of that is it means you get the scalability of Exasol that applies to your AI and ML workflows. And that gives you incredibly high performance and high volume. And we've found that for folks, when you actually start to run AI workloads at scale, you really need a tool and a platform that can keep up with the volume that you're working with. We also are able to store models directly within the database. And this is in addition to calling out to models that you may have stored perhaps on the cloud if you're using API endpoints, if you're using local storage like LM Studio or Olama. You can also store the models directly within Exasol. And the intention there is to give you as much flexibility and control as possible. And you want your model to live in the right place for your organization so that you can manage it and control it and have it drive workloads. And then if we look at how this impacts the value that this drives, we look at the top with agentic AI, and we look at the right-hand side here, which is value-driven AI applications. And the whole intention here is, yeah, you can do a ton with Exasol and AI, but we want to make sure we're organized around applications and solutions that drive value for your organization. So that might be building agentic workflows that interact directly with your database. It also might mean more classic data science applications like forecasting and prediction, as well as embedding AI and AI-aided insights directly in your analytics. So when we start to talk about AI within the context of Exasol, it opens up a whole world of potential. And so that's why I'm so excited about what we're talking about today, because we've added this entire new layer of the agentic experience, both conversational analytics as well as powering agents that can act autonomously. So we've got a ton to talk about, and it's all built on this AI engine within Exasol. So I'm going to go over a real quick primer on what is MCP. And for those of you that already are familiar, great, you're ahead. For those of you that are new, hopefully this gets you caught up real quick. So we're going to start with kind of your classic, I say classic because we're all familiar with it now, LLM or interaction experience. And that's a chat conversational experience. You've got your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, your Geminis, tons of these now. And this is kind of that conversational ask a question, get an answer. Now, these models are trained on tons of information. We see these new giant models getting released periodically. You've got, 4 or 5 versions, and they get smarter and smarter as they get trained on more and more data. And that means they have tons of answers to things. So you want to know what's the capital of Tasmania? You can ask. And because these models have been trained on so much data, the internet's worth of data, they know the answer to these. But let's say you want additional information. Let's say I want to know what the temperature was in Portland yesterday. Now, when a model is trained, its knowledge exists up until the point it was trained. So that means if I'm asking an LLM that was trained a couple months ago, it actually doesn't know what the temperature was in Portland yesterday. It might be able to make an educated guess, but that requires information that didn't exist at the time of training. And so that creates a blocker for us. So how do we augment our models with additional information that's more relevant, more recent? We can do that by giving our models access to the internet. So now, in addition to all of the information that our LLMs were trained on, we can say, hey, if there's something you don't know, like what the temperature was yesterday, you can go look it up. You can go on NOAA, you can go on your weather website and find that out. So we can augment our model with additional new information by giving it access to the web. Let's say I want to do an even more nuanced task. I want to summarize my emails from yesterday. Now I need to give the model access to even more information. At this point, I want to give it access to, say, my email server, so Outlook or Gmail. So this is another tool. Now, a classic LLM isn't going to be trained on my particular emails, of course, or at least we hope it's not. But if I want the LLM to be able to interact with my emails and provide this summary, I need to give it access to that tool or platform. So that's another kind of door or connection we want to make to extend the capabilities of our models. Now let's go even deeper. Let's say I want to know what my sales were last quarter. Now I know that my sales information lives in my Exasol database. How do I get that information to the model in the same way? I need to provide the model access to my database. Now, as we start to open up access to different tools, we need to provide guardrails. So I may want my LLM to summarize my emails, but I don't want it to write any emails yet. Or maybe I don't want it to send any. And let's say, I want to get access to my Exasol data, but I only want limited access, or only the data that I am allowed or have permission to access. So we create this system called the Model Context Protocol, which is MCP, which is a set of guardrails that we put around the interactions that a model can have with other tools and systems. And so that's this framework that we use, the Model Context Protocol, that defines the interactions that are allowed between a model and a source system, such as Exasol. So that tells us what MCP is. It's that set of allowed interactions that we define that a model can take with another platform. Now, why does the Exasol MCP in particular matter? We've built this, and it does exactly what we just saw on the last slide. It allows a model to talk to Exasol. Now, there's a ton of reasons why this in particular is unique. And one of the most important ones is high concurrency and high speed. As you start to build agentic systems, you're going to see they get very chatty. They're going to try lots of different queries. They're going to be going after lots of different data. And the more people you have using agents, you can see that multiplier effect. So you need a data platform that can handle and scale to meet that requirement, but also that isn't going to show up and give you a surprise bill because you had so many interactions with your database. And so Exasol's high performance, as well as our unique pricing model, helps meet that need. It can scale to meet the requirements of massive agentic workflows without breaking the bank. And then we also really focus on the flexibility of your deployment. And so many of the agents you might be seeing today, they kind of live in the cloud, right? And for some people that works great. But if you want to lock down that control and you don't want any of your data moving around in any public spaces, you want it in your network, you need a MCP server and a data platform that can meet that requirement. And Dirk's going to talk more about that because that's exactly what Exasol and our MCP server can do. And finally, we want to be both SQL first and agent ready. So we've got two primary kind of use cases. We have the agentic use case, which is an autonomous agent that's doing work for us. Then we have actual business users. So the beauty of the Exasol MCP server and what Dirk's going to demo is that it can unlock both of these use cases. And we're talking about both agentic workflows and that conversational analytics that lowers the barrier of entry. So it's easier for everyone to work with and understand data. So the simplest example we can show is on the left here, tell me about my data. This is an example of what happens when you use the Exasol MCP server. In this instance, I'm using it with Claude. And you can see, and you're going to see much more as Dirk dives into this, how easy it is to ask a question in natural language and get an answer that's using the Exasol MCP server, so Claude can directly connect to our data, and it can give us insight and help us do analytics on top of that data. It can pull out seasonal trends that can identify best performers. So this is just a taster of what happens when we start to use an MCP server with a database. And now I'm going to hand it over to Dirk so he can dive into more details.
Exactly. Sorry, I'm on mute. Sorry. So when you're talking text-to-SQL, we would like to talk about a new phrase called governed SQL. And for us, it's a process to create a valid SQL statement for the Exasol database from the human language. So the query you're typing in, where we control every single step of the process and ensure that it's on-premise and it stays on-premise for all three kinds of data integrity. So we can guarantee that nothing is really missing here with the data, no forged connections, links, and so on. Data security, so data will not be falsified or whatsoever, and data safety. Data stays on your premise. So basically, you could switch off your firewall to the internet and everything would work. This is a multi-step approach. It's not just a one shot where we're saying, I'm asking an LLM to do some stuff. It's a really a more complex, more complicated agentic workflow. Yeah. So Madeleine was talking about the MCP server, and this is a version which is taking the MCP server, which is officially already supported on the GitHub. You can download it right now as I'm talking. And we have then added the functionality for the extended text-to-SQL with this agentic workflow. The reason is, for liability reasons, we can absolutely not guarantee, for example, that an LLM is always friendly to your data. There might occur any kind in the future, some flaws or even attempts from hackers to utilize LLMs to make an attack to your data. And therefore, because it's the very same code base, so line by line, there's no need to install both MCP servers, the official supported one, which is on the official Exasol GitLab or GitHub, and the one on the Exasol lab. If you install both, it will trigger problems. So decide either to use only the one. Here you see the workflow, what we're calling a governed workflow, from the relevance check down to the result rendering. And let me go through it and explain all the steps here in between. So we are starting with a relevance check. So we are really checking by the use of an LLM, does the natural language question really fit to the database schema I'm working on? Yeah. So, and if there is a mismatch, we inform the user that we cannot do this, and when we stop the entire process. If the relevance check is okay, then we translate the human question into SQL. And then is coming the really the most important step. We validate the SQL statement, which is here. Validation of SQL statement means we check the nature of the SQL. We only allow read-only statements because of data security and data integrity. We cannot allow, without any further checking, any manipulative statements like an update, like in select into, and so on. And we are using here a famous open source library called SQL Clot, which now comes even with Exasol support to 100% identify if a SQL statement is just pure read-only or if there's any harmful code inside. If we decide that the validation fails, we notify the user and the process is coming to a stop. The next point is we are doing the SQL execution. So asking the database with our translated SQL to provide all the data I'm asking for. And then we have to see if the data is coming or if the database is returning a valid data set with some nice data, we can go to the result rendering. I'm showing it shortly. Or if we're coming back with a syntax error, for example, we say, okay, we need to rewrite the natural language question a little bit. And we again ask a large language model to do so without any user interaction. We are doing this up to 3 times. And if we are succeeding in these 3 times, wonderful, we are good to go. Otherwise, we inform the users and waving the so-called white flags that we are not can do this. Secondly, or thirdly, every positive SQL statement, which is returning a result, is a good result, a good SQL statement for us. And we are storing this along with the natural language question with the user and the execution time in a vector database. So the process itself, the translation process or the text-to-SQL processor is learning over time from the user behavior. Because whenever we have a new SQL statement to be created by a natural language question, we ask this vector database, is there a similar question in the past we can probably utilize to learn from it or even to make a better result? Let's assume SQL execution was positive. Even after a rewrite, we are going to render the result again by a large language model. And here we don't want to do any graphical style because depending on the tool, you need different plotting libraries, charting libraries, and so on. And we want to really stay tool agnostic. So we are just rendering textual output, mostly, not always, but mostly so-called markdown syntax-based tables. Most of the tools, if not anyone, can understand it. So this means I'm using an LLM at least 3 times for the relevance check, for the translation of the query into SQL, and then for the question rewrite, and even for the 4th time, then for rendering the result. By the way, whenever we notify the user that something is not possible, which means here our on the bottom line, our notification boxes, there's always an LLM involved, giving him some freedom how to formulate the answer and how to be descriptive to tell the end user what's going on, what is not possible. Because we are on-prem for the entire process, here is, it's like an architecture template. You probably know where you have your data. We have the Exasol AI Lab environment, which also can be beneficial from the MCP server, and then we have our database. But between the database and the end user, which is here the AI desktop, we plug in the MCP server, who is interacting as an interface and is on purpose contacting the LLM server to do the translation processes. And once again, everything here is then on-premise. There's no need for any internet resources. And this makes it really also callable for what we say data safety. Your data is safe. It's not leaving your own premises. So how does it look like? I just need to change the screen. So you should now see my Open Web UI. Okay, so Open Web UI is our tool of choice to work with it. And the good thing is it accepts multiple different large language servers and your own large language model you want to use. It does not rely like ChatGPT or Claude on their one, which are residing on the internet. Secondly, I can build up your workspaces where I can even do further prompt instructions how to guide the LLM. I want to start with a typical question, for example, for the retail business. And I'm asking, what is the highest number of sales position within a transaction I've recorded? So what you need to know is in this database, we probably have 1 billion transactions and about 6 billion sales positions. However, I'm in an environment which is definitely not fulfilling my taxi request or my retail request. First of all, also I need to tell him that I have an MCP server here up and running. So I'm asking here right now to work on it. And here you can even see the MCP server. Yeah, and he's saying, okay, I have a relevance check, and the relevance check is saying I'm not relevant, and he's giving me quite a descriptive message that it is not possible to answer this one. So let me go now to the retail sales, which is probably the one I really needed to use, and again, asking him the same question. In parallel, I want to show you how the process is working. And if you can see here the execution times, you will see that all the execution times from the Exasol database are lightning fast. And the point where time is being consumed is really working with the LLM. But this is even a computer with a GPU card behind. And you see I have transactions with 36 sales positions. So in case of this one, I would like to know how many sales transactions do I have which only have one less, like 35. Again, I'm starting it. And let's see LLM working. And you see 8,421 transactions have exactly 35 sales positions. This is one kind. The other one would be, I want to see the top performers, the top articles. So let's go to a typical query, show me the top 10 articles with regard to revenue, include sales price and units sold. Again, you don't see the screen. Wait. Now you should see it again. Yeah, so once again, he is coming up with the technical stuff like what are my top articles with the revenue, with the units sold and the price, and everything is being answered. Now I could go and even say, well, I want to go back to the what we call New taxi schema. Let's go enable the MCP server again. And imagine I want to build up a delivery service with New York taxis, but I want to do some road analytics. And this query here is a little bit different, because in New York, you probably have toll fees you have to incorporate in your calculations. And I want to show you that even with natural description of a date, the first day of May, for example, I can ask, and this will be translated correctly. I do not have to specify really 2025.5.1 or whatsoever. Yeah, and this is now something where I need a multiple join and hefty date conversions. And again, we can see that everything is coming up. He's working on it. Every single step is being outlined. Database itself is really, really fast. Now he has queried everything and rendered everything, and he's coming back now. And this was an easy stuff, no table required. He says, my mileage is 47,433 miles and some feet whatsoever. where I pay more than $15 for fees, for toll fees, and revenue for $20. I could now show you a gazillion of other queries, but the other question is, I would like to ask my system in 2 weeks or so, or somewhere, what did I do in the past? So I want to learn. What I can do right now is, because we are storing every single query and every single question in a vector database, I could ask, for example, show me SQL statements where I queried for toll fees and only for toll fees. Yeah. Did I do this in the past? If yes, how did the query look like? How was the question look like? And here, Exasol database is not involved anymore. Everything is happening here now on the vector database. And here coming up my queries. And these are the queries in the past I have formulated regarding with toll fees, you know. And then I could even say, can you show me the total fees for each cap type on the 1st of May? I could jump back, because this is some sort of guided analytics where he made some proposals, which we can use in the future. And he's coming back again. We can check again. He is now rendering. He did it everything in 9 seconds. So you wonder why 9 seconds, why is it so good or so bad? Typically, the response time for such queries is probably in a sub-second. And I can prove here easily that we are also in the sub-second, like retrieve database schema and so on, that we are in sub-second response times. The point here is really the execution on the LLM. The better the hardware in operating the LLM, the better the response times. However, secondly, Text-to-SQL is probably not the tool of choice for a data analyst or for a data scientist, because he knows SQL statements and how to write a SQL statement much better probably than an LLM. But this is for another class of audience, for the rare user, for the coincidence user or occasional user who needs to do some stuff and where SQL knowledge or BI tool knowledge is not on his job profile. With this, I would like to hand over to Madeleine, and let me go to the key takeaways slide.
Awesome. I love to see it, Derek. There's just so much cool stuff that can be done in this space. So it's great to just kind of get in and see a live demo. And it's always a little stressful to do a live demo when you're recording. But I think that I always love to see it, and I know the folks here do as well. So there's a lot of kind of stuff that we talked about, Musa, even though it's a short period of time, there's a ton of information here. So let's try to distill some of that. First is the difference between building a dashboard and having a conversation with your data, like what Dirk showed. Dashboards and reports are pretty static. You can add filters, you can add interaction and functionality, and that's great for some use cases. But as you're doing that deeper data exploration and you have that back and forth, that's where having that dynamic environment is incredibly important. And so having both really is helpful. And honestly, from my own experience, what I've done is I've used our MCP server to do some early data exploration. And then once I get to kind of the insight that I want to share, I can bring that into a dashboard or a presentation, or even use an LLM and a chat interface to help create the visualization to present that information. So I think using those two together is really useful. What we talked about at the beginning is that high concurrency and high performance is really critical here. When you have just one person, even just one person, you can see the number of queries that Dirk issued and the fast response time that he got looking at large amounts of data. We want to provide a positive user experience, and we want that user experience to scale and continue to be delightful and fast and responsive as more and more people start to interact with the data in this way. So it all comes back to, do you have a database that can scale to meet those requirements? And that's what Exasol can do. Now, of course, standard, we kind of just want to ground in the fact that this is pretty darn cool. We're letting an LLM talk directly to our database, which is incredible. And we're kind of only just seeing the beginning of what's possible here. Now, we introduced the term governed SQL, and Dirk talked about what this means. And it's really about ensuring data integrity, data security, and data safety. So we or you control the entire process, from the natural language query to the SQL that gets generated, to the rendering, to the data itself. All of that can live in your own private ecosystem, and that's incredibly important. I already have customers asking for this. I already have people in our kind of audience that are asking for this. everyone's requirements are going to be a little bit different, but you need to know that your platform can adapt to whatever those requirements are. And one thing I loved about the workflow that Dirk showed is we have these human in the loop checkpoints. So at various points, the LLM is trying something, then letting you know, hey, it worked or it didn't work. And so you have these validation points. And so that helps build trust in this process. It's not just an agent or an LLM going out and making a bunch of inferences or decisions. It's a collaborative process. And that's incredibly important because we know that LLMs can make mistakes, they can hallucinate. So having a human in the loop helps reduce and manage that risk. So the final thing here is we've talked about a ton of stuff, we showed you a ton of stuff, and we've got more content coming. So there's going to be a blog post coming shortly that's going to talk about all of this in more detail, that coming from Dirk directly, as well as the code itself that Dirk showed today. So you'll be able to implement this yourself. So we have two kind of code pieces that we suggest you test out. The first is our core MCP server. Now that's available today. It's free to use. You can plug it directly into a free version of Exasol as well, our community edition. So if you want to test out the MCP server yourself today, you go right ahead. That's available, and we'll send out some additional information as well. Then if you want to test out our governed SQL and text-to-SQL on top of that, so that more enhanced workflow, that'll be coming out shortly as a prototype that you can also test on top of that. So get ready, get excited, get your thinking caps on, and go ahead and try it out for yourself. And now I want to, oh, yeah, anything to add, Dirk?
Sorry, meanwhile, two questions popped up. The one is, would it be possible to manually add example SQL statements and questions to the vector database? Sort of like certified answer from a data analyst. Right now in the code, it is not possible because this is an automated process. Writing the code for this on base of this code in GitHub, it's probably less than an hour work. Because you just need a form where you add the question and the certified SQL statement, maybe the user, and that's it. And then you store this in the same collection in the vector database. So this would be easily possible by minor changes to the code. Maybe it's a good idea, by the way, and I might add this in a future version, because governed SQL code here on GitHub will be a managed version. It's not a one-time effort. This is always going to be managed and being maintained in parallel to the original MCP server. So to guarantee that they are really having always the same functionality. And the second question I have seen here, which probably I should answer, can you share, or could you share experience regarding what kind of data works best for the MCP server? And he elaborates further. In our testing, simple data sets with all the business logic already handled in SQL beforehand worked well, whereas it really struggled when the query needed multiple tables with specific logic tied to them. Yes and no. It's quite simple. This is a third, by the way, this is a third iteration. It was a steep learning curve. When you put everything like text-to-SQL on a semantic layer, like the Exasol semantic layer, everything is easing up dramatically and is improving even the more than good quality already. However, if you have just an ordinary database schema, it depends on the design on the schema. So for example, comment all the important columns, comment the tables. If you are using columns for linking tables, giving it a sales the same name, like sales ID on the transaction table should lead to a sales ID in the sales position table, for example. And if you give such a more or less good database design, then the LLM can really understand how tables are linked together and find all the connections to each other. If you're using a totally chaotic database design, then you're absolutely right. And then the LLM would struggle enormously. Saying this, with a good database design and in testings without a semantic layer, we already come way above 90% of good shots in SQL statements. With a semantic layer like Exasol semantic layer or ESL, it's even improving further to above 95%.
We had another question come in, which is which Exasol version is required to use the MCP integration? We tested the MCP that we've recently launched with version 8. So that's the supported version. Version 8 and up will support MCP. I expect it would work with version 7 if you're still testing on an old, or if you're still running on a haven't upgraded to 8 yet. But the supported version is 8 and forward. And if you want to test it, and you kind of come up against any issues with version 7, that's where just downloading Community Edition, which is on version 8, is kind of a quick workaround to make sure you can still test it out with the appropriate version. But yeah, so start with 8, and if that's not an option, or if you're not there yet, then try out the Community Edition just to be on the safe side. Or try 7 and let us know if you hit any issues, and we can go back and help out. That's a great place for the community forum. So all of you that have joined today, as you're testing this out, if you have more questions, going to the Exasol community forum as you start to learn and explore is a great way to share feedback with us. We're constantly iterating and testing and improving the MCP server. And so we want to hear from you as you test it out. If you find things that you want to add or things that are causing issues, great feedback to provide.
Yeah. There's one question, and I think it's an addition to the question before, how the LLM knows which tables and columns it should choose. Once again, best is a naming convention, but it's always a good idea to ask the LLM to comment on the tables and the columns if not done properly beforehand. We did this for demos, and it's amazing how an LLM can comment such columns, even to be used for data joining. It's an improvement as well. So the more information you can provide to the LLM, the better.
I think we're good to go. So
yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Thanks for the engagement, and definitely want to encourage you to engage in additionally in any other way that works for you. So our community forum, the upcoming content we'll be seeing, our GitHub, where you can test this out for yourself, any and all avenues. And we're looking forward to sharing more with you as we continue to iterate here. Anything you want to say to close it out, Dirk?
Yeah, stay curious. Both blog posts pretty soon, and prototype should be available at latest by the end of this month. It's on the works, and otherwise, happy Exasoling.